set up the recording.
Поїхали. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Hi, Tom.
Don't know if you say здравствуйте in Ukraine or not.
Добрий день.
Добрий день.
Дякую,
Окей.
добрий день. Я знаходжусь в офісі Національної спілки журналістів України, в головному офісі у Києві на Хрещатику якраз. Беру з вами інтерв'ю. Це центр.
So Sergey is now located in Kiev in the main office of Journalists Association of Ukraine is right here.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm located in Pärnu in Estonia.
In Estonia. Okay. Nice to meet you, Katerina.
Nice to meet you too again.
Okay.
So let's start.
Start.
Yes, we can start. Would you like to read your questions, or shall I simply
Yeah,
start
we have a
answering?
list of questions that we have already sent to you and a couple more. So we would like to start first with the question that is: Russia launched its spring offensive on March 17th. You've noted that the general staff is providing inaccurate information. And in your assessment, what is the greatest threat emerging from this Russian offensive?
Well, the greatest threat from the offensive itself is for Zaporіжжя, sorry, where the Russians are already something like 10 to 15 kilometers outside of the city and infiltrating in its direction. We have even seen already back in January, February that sometimes they are also deploying their UAVs forward towards into the outskirts of Zaporіжжя and park them and waiting for suitable targets. So in my opinion, this is the most endangered city or place in Ukraine. There is also, of course, threat for Sloviansk and for and now I lost the name of that town for this area up there in the center of the front line. No, I've just sorry. That's going to take longer because I'm all the time, I'm following both wars at once, the war in Ukraine and the war against Iran, and it's not easy to memorize everything. Anyway,
yeah,
the point is
over here too. Everybody's watching closely our war and what is going on in Iran.
It's quite tense, let's say this way, and busy days. So anyway, the point is. The Russians have been defeated in Kup'янськ, in the city center of Kup'янськ. So this is a good news. Where they are still in the outskirts in the north, and they're trying to push from the east towards that town. And overall, I expect, I must say, that for the rest of this year, they are going to try continuing pushing in direction of Zaporіжжя foremost, where they don't have it easy, not as easy as up there in the north or northeast, because simply because their supply links are much longer to the southern Zaporožžia than there are, for example, towards Kup'янськ or towards Sloviansk. But yeah, these are my biggest worries, so to say, in Ukraine.
That was our second question: is that which of Ukraine's major cities are under direct threat if the Russians persist its spring campaign? Especially, what is the risk level for Kharkiv, Dnipro, Kherson, Suми?
Kharkiv is simply too big, so the Russians are going to keep it under pressure, to bomb and shell it and rocket it at every opportunity. We have seen last, 2 days, particular, the Russians hitting Kharkiv very hard, and that was really unpleasant for Ukraine, what was going on over there. But the city is simply too big for the Russians to try assaulting it, and they are also too far away. So I don't see any kind of immediate threat in terms of ground attack on Kharkiv. Dnipro is likely to follow after Zaporіжжя, where they might try to push all the way to Dnipro and isolate both cities, Zaporіжжя and Dnipro, from the western bank of the river. Kherson is similar like Kharkiv. They are going to continue bombing it and terrorizing the population. And Sumy is also far too far away. We have seen what has happened earlier what was that, 2 or 3 months ago, where the local Ukrainian group of forces has managed to defeat their offensive, their attempt to attack in direction of Sumy, and they didn't manage it. They didn't manage this. The Russians didn't manage this. So what has happened is that even weak Ukrainian forces under apostrophes, and initially, early, that was last year in late summer, autumn, the Ukrainian forces in Sumy area were actually quite disorganized, weakened by withdrawals of important units from that area, but they have still managed to keep the Russians away from the city, and this is what counts. So as long as the Russians are too far away and lacking forces to try it again, I don't expect them to do anything important in Sumy. So as I said, my biggest concern is Zaporožžia right now.
Mm-hmm. We also had a discussion with Sohi a couple of days ago, comparing those major cities that are under assault of Russia and that are on the border, comparing the situation inside of the cities from the Ukrainian point of view. Because like Kherson, Harkiv, Zaporіжжя, Sumy are constantly under attack. Yet we see like a drastic comparison between, for example, 2,000 cities, Zaporіжжя and Kherson, in which like Zaporіжжя is still working, living, managing to cope with the war conditions, and yet Kherson is kind of slowly dying. Businesses living, people living, and what are the perspectives of that? And because the war is still continuing, and like we are fearing the worst for the smaller cities and the way they are managed.
Well, you see through in your own explanation and description that the Russians are kind of successful in regards of killing Kherson. Why? Because people cannot survive over there due to this constant pressure, constant terror attacks on civilians, on emergency responders, on even on vehicles evacuating civilians are hit. And not only in Kherson, it's the same in Kramatorsk, for example. That was the town I've forgotten, the name of which I've forgotten earlier. So I'm afraid that the same is going to happen with Zaporižžia. Zaporižžia, sorry. Yeah, as much as it's still working right now, the city, eventually it's going to come under severe Russian pressure sooner or earlier, simply because it's so close to the front line meanwhile. So, and this is what the Russians are after making life impossible in large parts of Ukraine so that the people leave the area. We see this currently happening in Kramatorsk, for example, where the people are also describing a town which is well devoid of civilians, and ever more people are leaving. There is no organized evacuation actually, but people would like to live. Lots of people at least would like to live. Surviving is hard because it is under constant bombardment. It is under constant UAV attacks and so on. So there is a growing impression of desperation and frustration in Kramatorsk, for example. And Sloviansk is quite close after. Of course, both cities, both towns have been surrounded by heavy Ukrainian fortifications already since 2014 in reaction. As soon as Ukrainian armed forces have recovered them, they have started constructing fortifications around Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. But well, the prospects in long term, I don't see them being significantly better, simply because the command structure at the top of Ukraine is not better. So I'm sorry for not having better news for you right now, but yeah, I would say Zaporožžia is most threatened right now. And in Kherson, this is almost a lost case because Ukraine has never managed to establish a bridgehead on the eastern side of Dnipro in order to then widen this in order to push the Russian artillery and UAVs away from the city. But in comparison to that, position of, for example, Kharkiv is much better, and Dnipro is still, let's say, 6 to 9 months away from a similar situation like in Kherson already now, and like very soon in Zaporižžia as well.
Okay.
question, Tom.
Yeah, that we've sent, I'm just like reading the message.
No problem.
Sent me. So that we have sent you the list of questions, and that we can go one by one on that list. So that was the next question, is that did the shutdown of the Starlink services have a major impact on the economy in March? And if so, could you provide specific operational examples?
Yes, it has had such a very strong impact upon the capability of Russian formations, Russian army formations, in particular in southern Zaporozhye, to communicate, and they have, for a while, they have lost control over several units, and we have seen Ukraine immediately exploiting this opportunity for a counterattack. Now, this wasn't what kind of mechanized drive all the way to the Azov Sea, but still, it was nice to see for once at least Ukraine to advance. So specific example. Let me check the map because I've had this all discussed. Yeah, mostly down in the area west of Priluki, for example, and then east of Zaporozhye, some 30-40 kilometers east of Zaporozhye on the Yanchu River, and so on. And there are still advances of Ukrainian armed forces in this area towards southeast, even though at the same time the Russians are already launching their first counterattacks and trying to move or infiltrate into positions in between of Ukrainian advances, so to say. So, for example, I have to resize my map. Sorry, just a second. So this is all in the area south of Pokrovsk, or more precisely between Hulai in the south and Pokrovsk in the north. And this is where the Russians are already trying to counterattack, to infiltrate again and to regain the initiative. So essentially, the problem is the following. I'm trying to find a diplomatic language for this, all of what is going on. We have a new Minister of Defense in Ukraine, and as you have correctly remarked earlier, he is trying to replace all the losses and lack of infantry, in particular in the Ukrainian armed forces, with deployment of robots. So he's trying to bolster the production of UAVs, and flying UAVs and ground UAVs as well. And that is certainly, let's say this way, solution in the right direction, or step in the right direction. The problem is now the following. As much as production of UAVs is bolstered and increasing, and there are ever more of them, there are still not enough of them to cover the entire front line. So there are only specific sectors of the front line which are well protected by UAVs and interceptor UAVs, while other sectors are not as well protected. Above all of this, let's say this way: if you have a kid and you give him a pencil pen into the hand, without teaching him how to use that pencil pen, there is no use of that kid and no use of the pencil pen. So if you give the same kid a Glock 9 into the hand, the most you can expect is for the kid to shoot himself, because it cannot use the Glock 9. You're without explaining him, of course, how to use it. It is absolutely useless. It's foremost dangerous for him. So there is the same syndrome in regards of the Ukrainian armed forces. You have this sadly totally incompetent president at the top, and you have this totally incompetent Glavcom at the top. And you can give them all the armament of NATO, and they are not going to do anything better with it than they are already doing with what they have got. That is the problem. So the situation you have is, one of Ukrainian officers has expressed this back in February. You're excelling at killing huge numbers of Russians at the tactical level, but you are still missing coherent operations at the operational level. There is nothing of that to be seen, except in form of local counterattacks by single brigades, not brigades, but battalions and companies, torn off brigades from the entirely different sectors of the front line. And you have this general chaos at the front line. You have, moreover, Zelensky is pumping ever more troops into his, I call them toy soldiers, excuse me for especially, it is not meant as offense to the troops themselves, but to what is he doing with them, and what is his commander of these assault troops doing with their troops, with soldiers, with human beings, with fathers, with sons, with husbands who are assigned to these independent assault regiments. They are sent into pointless counterattacks, suffering heavy losses. This is then covered up or explained for lies or whatever else. And if they are lucky not to be sent into such counterattacks, then they are wasted for some other kind of counterattacks to recover positions or to achieve some kind of successes, excuse me, which are then widely publicized in the social media, so that Zelensky has good news or great news for Zelensky, and Zelensky can score plus points or collect likes in the social media. This is not the way to fight the war. And even if you would now all of a sudden have 2 million of UAVs available, things wouldn't be better, because they would still be used in the wrong fashion, just like the troops and the heavy equipment are used in the wrong fashion. Ukraine still has a problem that its armed forces have not undergone any kind of reform, that the officers are not better trained, that the top commanders are still incompetent, that the troops are still badly mishandled, badly treated by their superiors, and so on. So the problems are all the same. We are talking about for 2 years already, actually. And therefore, one cannot expect any kind of super turbo results now all of a sudden, just because there are lots of UAVs. Where there are lots of UAVs, where the Ukrainians are managing to deploy lots of UAVs, then you hear the Russians complaining, oh gosh, 300 UAVs attacked us at once, or 400 UAVs attacked us as once. We have suffered terrible losses, and so on and so on. But what is the result? The result is movement to the front line for 2, 5, perhaps 10 kilometers, nothing more. You're not winning the war. You are winning a local battle. You're not even winning an operational level battle, just a local tactical battle. That is the problem. So what is happening right now is that Ukraine has won a few tactical battles through February, March, and that's it. The front line is essentially back where it was, let's say, November last year, at least in the area west of Pokrovsk and south of Pokrovsk. I don't see this changing anything fundamentally in this war. That is my problem about all of this. So when you ask me, did the shutdown of Starlink services impact the Russians? Yes, but the opportunities was lost by Ukraine, because the army simply has no means or not yet the means to fight in different fashion. And I doubt it is going to ever have means to fight in different fashion and exploit such opportunities in the future, because its commanders are still the same, like those who haven't exploited this opportunity at earlier times.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say it, I'm not happy about this. On the contrary, this is extremely frustrating. Excuse me for interrupting you now. This is extremely frustrating, and it is saddening to see that your troops, you know that I'm running a small charity also. We are collecting and trying to obtain equipment for whatever ZSU units are asking us to send them, to help them. You know, the guys are meanwhile happy if they get a field generator or a charging station or power banks for their handies, laptops and such things. I mean, this is so sad to see. And then the evacuation of the wounded in a Volkswagen T5 without any kind of equipment inside, just to pull them out of the battlefield zone, to bring them into a safe area. This is sad to watch, because I know how much I have at least learned how much are Ukrainians capable of doing, and this is not what you deserve. This is simply under any kind of acceptable levels what your commanders and political leadership are doing with you as people. That is what is making me mad privately. from my point of view.
Старлінки. Вплив. Вплив відключення.
The Starlinks, yeah. You wanted to return back to the Starlinks and the
To Starlink, yes. Look, the Russians are always going to find a solution. If they can't use Starlink, they are going to use something else. They are pulling their cables forward, and so communicating the forward headquarters, field headquarters of communicating with those behind. And their troops, the way they are operating, they don't need that much of a Starlink for their coordination or something else. They simply take 2 or 3 troops and tell them, okay, your aim is to reach the village 10 kilometers from here. Go ahead and do it. And the next group, and the next group, and the next group, until one or 2 or 3 of these have survived over there. Then they send the UAV. They're following what is going on the front line with UAVs without Starlink. If they find them there, they drop them radios, batteries, food, water, ammunition, and keep them supplied. And in the ZSU, and they are 5 or 10 kilometers behind the ZSU alliance, and the Ukrainian forces have too few troops to control the front line, which means that the front line is no front line, but it's a line of disparate positions which are occupied in some places and then not occupied for the next 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers even, which means there are huge gaps in between that the Russians can infiltrate. So that this Starlink, the loss of Starlink, is not having such an impact upon the Russians as it would have if there would be a loss of Starlink on the Ukrainian side.
Роботи і дрони. Міністр оборони сказав, що хоче зробити 150-кілометрову зону. На його погляд, це реально?
Yeah, there was also a question. So he's asking that now we have this claim from our minister that we are going to build a 100 kilometers zone of drones, land drones and air drones to control. So this is like a huge project now. And also I wanted to add from my side that there is actually in Ukrainian social media, there is an ongoing discussion suggesting that NATO's weapons are becoming outdated in the means that they are expensive, they are in a short supply, and that they are compared to Ukrainian ground drones and interception drones, that they are cheaper, faster, and that before there was a joke that that these drones are made on the kitchens, and this is like a war of housewives.
Let me help you.
We are more successful into catching the rockets and stopping Shaheds than NATO weapons, actually.
Yes, you are, and that by far. So this is the least of your problems, believe me. The UAVs and development of interceptors UAVs is the least of your problems. Sooner or later, you are going to become capable of manufacturing more than 1,000 or more a day, which then means that you are going to become capable of countering such Russian mass UAV attacks like the last 2 weeks, where they are deploying up to 900 UAVs within 24 hours. So this is something I'm less concerned, because you are managing this despite all the power shortages, although your power supply system has been demolished almost completely. So you have just 5 or 6 power plants still working, and you are still managing to keep your production of UAVs alive and deployment. So for air defense purposes, my biggest worry is the following: that because of incompetent president who is demanding the army to do something which it can't do, but the army is commanded by an incompetent Glavcom who must feed good news to his president, you are going to rush the newly manufactured robots or ground UAVs and all the possible FPVs, which are meanwhile in production in huge numbers. You are going to rush them into action much too early, like I think you are already doing. And this is then going to give the Russians the opportunity to recognize new threats and adjust their own tactics to them. which then means in turn that once you have really serious numbers of these new UAVs and ground UAVs, you are going to have to face the Russians who are ready to counter this threat. That is my worry. So instead of taking care to shut up and to reorganize, let the army reform itself, Zelensky is actually causing ever more problems for purely political and populist reasons, which have absolutely nothing to do with actually fighting the war and defeating the Russians. So you need, I'm going to repeat this for 172nd time or something, you need to give your army the time to reform itself, to find a new GlavCom, to find a new general staff, to find new commanders of specific branches, to retrain its officer corps, to create a new corps or new non-commissioned officers, these are sergeants, corporals, and so on, and to start taking care about its troops. This is the A to O of the alphabet of what you need to do as Ukraine, and as a country, as a nation, and as an armed force. In this regards, nothing is happening for more than 2 years now, and until this changes, sorry, you can really bring millions of UAVs. You can really excel in manufacturing UAVs, developing UAVs. Fantastic work, absolutely. My hat is off for Ukraine in this regards. But in this regards, you have people who are eventually deciding how to use these UAVs, all of this new technology. They can't cope with that task. They are wrong in place. They have to go. This has to happen. And then you can expect this new weaponry you are developing, your people are developing, to have a serious effect on the battlefield. Unless this happens, sorry, nothing of this. So that is why I sympathize with commentary by your people and even by your president in regards of this incompetent at the top of the Rheinmetall. I sympathize and I agree with this commentary, but overall effects are going to remain limited. That is the problem. And this is sad actually to watch. This is so frustrating about this war in Ukraine. You could have kicked the Russians 2 times over by now out of Ukraine. You didn't, because your president and your top commanders are incompetent. Excuse me for expression. I can only repeat myself in this regards. And this is not going to change regardless how much and what kind of new weapon you introduce to service. On the other hand, to come to the second sub-question or part of the question, NATO is lagging behind so badly that this is laughable. And what is the best, NATO is so arrogant and so high-nosed in regards of experiences, combat experiences for Ukraine, that they do not even realize how far are they lagging behind. This is like, I'm frequently comparing NATO with ancient Athenians, who were at the height of their development, and they had democracy and they had this fair rule and everything was fine and perfect. They were so highly developed that they couldn't imagine ever getting defeated in some kind of a war or falling into under somebody else's rule. And this is how Athens eventually went down, because they were too arrogant about their own supremacy. And this is what NATO thinks as well. Oh, we are so fine, we are so great, we're so professional armed forces, and so highly developed artillery, and such top air forces, and they look so splendid at parades. While when there is some exercise and then just one Ukrainian officer is around, and he they're gaming, so to say, specific scenarios, and then all of a sudden the Ukrainian officer is defeating everybody because NATO is simply not up to the task of fighting a modern war. We see this also, this degeneration of Western military thinking presently in the Persian Gulf or in the Middle East, if you like, or Western Asia, actually, because this war is constantly spreading. We see the American troops, American air defense forces, or army air defenses, operating such complex, super expensive systems like THAAD, like Patriot, arriving in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, Bahrain, and United Arab Emirates, and then doing such a fundamental mistake like parking their radars in the same place for 1 week, for 2 weeks, for 1 month, for 4 months. This is something, meanwhile, even in Ukraine, fortunately, excuse me for expression, is unthinkable. And when your advisors come over there, they cannot believe their eyes. What are the Americans doing? And not only Americans. So why? Because for them it is normal after every fighting action, you pack your stuff and move at least 50 meters. Why? Because once you have opened fire, the enemy has your coordinates and is certain to strike these coordinates. So if you move just 50 meters in some cases, is enough to avoid enemy fire. Of course, it's better if you move 500 meters. Then you are not going to even notice that enemy is firing at your former position. But the Americans do not think this way. And they are so dogmatic in their training that the lower-ranking officers are not doing anything without an order from above. And now even more so because since Trump too is in power, and Hexet is purging the Pentagon against cleaning everybody who they're saying no or I'm not sure. Everybody must say yes, and that's it. It's like in former Soviet Union under Hexet. And now, how do you think that these officers who are replacing all the people who are purged, who have been purged by Hexet, how do you think they are now going to instill some sense of self-initiative initiative between their subordinates? They all expect only the best news, exactly like Zelensky and Sierski, and everybody who is bringing any kind of bad news is an incompetent and also to be fired. And they are firing them. So you have always the same problem exactly like we have in Ukraine. And now expect that U.S. armed forces are going to perform much better. They can't for exactly the same reasons like in Ukraine. What is ironic about all of this is that Ukrainian armed forces are still performing much better than the Russian, because the Russian system is even more degenerated than Ukrainian or Western. So, we see some highly promising patterns and developments in certain aspects, but particularly in Ukraine. But on the other hand, we see also lots of generals who are spoiling this beyond belief. And this is as tragic, to watch as anything else. This is extremely frustrating even, I must say. And the question is just, how much longer can the West afford this actually? Because even the Europe, the EU part of NATO, is not now investing into its future and saying, okay, guys, let's do this in serious fashion and then invest into high technologies and future technologies in development of AI, in development of robotics and so on. No, they're borrowing money and then outsourcing production. Let's outsource production to Ukraine and to a little bit to Romania and to Poland and wherever it's cheap. We just don't want to do this invest because we have peace here, and everything is fine. And the people should just think how to spend their next vacation and how to buy a next Chinese car, please, if possible, because we are earning from that as well. That is how the system works. So there is no general fundamental reform of the politics, therefore no fundamental reform of the armed forces. We are still arrogant, we are still high-nosed, racist to the bone, especially in the armed forces, which is also in the situation where, of course, you as Ukrainians or you Eastern Europeans, we don't care about you. Who are you to teach us anything? We are the cultivated Westerners and we know better anyway by our birth, not to talk about our education. Who cares about combat experience and so on and so on. So we are constantly turning in this circle, which is, really endless. Until, something happens that we bloody our noses or have not only one eye blue, but both of them. Hopefully just that, and then perhaps somebody might wake up and change something about all of this.
So just returning to main question, bottom line for the Ukrainian defense minister stated that his intention is to replace human troops with robotic system. And what is your expectation?
It's very realistic.
Is it realistic or not?
Yes. It's perfectly realistic. It is perfectly realistic. He's going to replace most of the infantry by robots and by pilots sitting in the back, some 10 or 15 kilometers, hopefully, or even more, and steering these UAVs or robots by remote control. Perfect, wonderful, fantastic. Unless the Russians detect the base of the pilots and hit them, which is happening ever more often. Meanwhile, it's more dangerous in Ukrainian armed forces to serve as a pilot than actually as an infantryman in position. And B, the problem remains the same, that the command does not know how to use this new technology. So they do not listen to advice, and therefore you can really deploy now 5 million robots and rush them into Russian positions, and nothing is going to change because the command Glavcom does not know how to use all of this new technology. That is the tragedy of this situation. You're doing, again, you as Ukrainians, people who are developing all of these robots, who are inventing new systems, you're doing great stuff, fantastic stuff, highly promising stuff. And if somebody pits you now against some other opponent but the Russians, you are probably, for example, somebody from NATO, one or another smaller armed force, you're going to roll over them. Absolutely no problem. This is how realistic it is what you are developing. Absolutely no doubt about this. But your command style is incompetent to the bone, and therefore, in grand total, not much is going to change in this war against the Russian invasion in Ukraine.
Okay, let's move to the other question. So, what aircraft has Ukraine received from NATO and partners during the entire invasion and so far?
Well, as far as I know, there are some 40 F-16s, about a dozen of F-16s. There are now rumors, but I haven't seen any firm confirmation that first Gripen have arrived, and that the first of sub 340 AWACS have arrived. And we have seen now the last, 1-2 weeks, two unexplainable Russian losses of Su-34s. Nobody knows what has happened. Nobody would say what has happened to them. So I guess that some of this is already in action. So let's say some 60 modern, relatively modern combat aircraft. It is a second-hand NATO aircraft, combat aircraft, actually all are from 1980s, 1990s. And we see them now in service with Ukrainian Air Force. And we see them in particular in service when there are these huge UAV strikes from Russia. They are shooting this new, not even new, they are old. These F-16 Mirages are scrambled, sent into the air, and they are shooting down lots of drones. Absolutely no dispute about this. But there is still a problem, that is the long range reach. It means they all lack very long range air-to-air missiles. Which is why, when was that? I think yesterday or the day before, there was an F-16 underway over the Kharkiv area, and was about to fire a strike, a ground attack on Russian positions, and it couldn't because it was detected by approaching by an Su-35, and Su-35 fired a single R-37 from something like 100 something kilometers away. And the F-16 had to abort its mission and beat a hasty retreat. This is the problem. If you would now have a fighter interceptor with a missile with similar range like R-37, this is the Russian longest range air-to-air missile, then the things would look differently. Alternatively, was revealing its position to approach to within range of its own MRAM, medium range air-to-air missiles. And then with help of the radar picture or the radar video from the sub 340 to launch this MRAM missile without activating its own systems and take the Russians by surprise. I hope we are going to see something of that kind in the coming days, weeks, or months, and then happening ever more often, because this would really be something very bad for the Russians. Why? It would stop their cab attacks with these attacks with these glide bombs from, meanwhile, up to 120 kilometers away from the front line. So it would gradually push the Russian Air Force away from the front line. This would be a fantastic achievement. If it happens, let's see if it happens, if it's possible. Right now, I don't see any kind of indications for this happening.
Recently, we had great news about new stage of a lone missile attack.
Yes,
for Ukraine
news, yes.
in St. Petersburg. Yeah, we had a sleepless night here in Perno when Ukrainian drones were roaming all over Estonia, even up to Perno, which is quite far away from Russian border. one of the furthest spots. Yet, despite that, we still were able to attack. And would you like to comment on that success? And if you have any ideas of what could be the next?
Well, this was the biggest, nicest surprise of the last month. This big Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil exporting facilities in St. Petersburg area. Excuse me, I still almost called it Leningrad area. It's as follows. Yes, it was a very interesting routing of these UAVs via Belarus and then up the Poland and Baltic states, so to avoid the mess of Russian air defenses. Fantastic idea. I'm not sure that NATO was in love with this idea, but it had to tolerate it, because if it's tolerating all the time for 4 years, the Russian UAVs flying all over Poland and Romania, so not your problem. And then these UAVs passed over the Baltic states to reach all the way to St. Petersburg. And
officially, they were just where the road was through Belarus and Russia directly, and it was NATO is denying that they were given any permissions to cross. It's just they're saying that it was the Russians trying to send them off from their territory. That's why they were going through Estonia and coming up to Finland.
That is perfectly fine. That way,
official.
No, that is perfectly fine that way. Let's leave it at the official explanation. Fine with me, no problem. Point is, these UAVs have for once reached this major oil exporting facilities in St. Petersburg area and knocked out 4 or 5 of them, but really blew them up. And this is nice. And with this single blow, it was not a single blow, but with this series of blows, you have knocked out something like 40% of the Russian oil exporting capability. And that's right at the time Putin could already expect to significantly increase his income from oil exports, thanks to this idiocy or this stupid war against Iran. So fantastic achievement. I only hope that the Ukrainian command is going to continue in similar fashion. Why? Because what you did last year, you did something similar, but then got lost in your typical inter-branch rivalry. That means you have, I think I have counted 6 or 7 different agencies and branches of armed forces, and each is operating its own UAVs, each at its own device. That means one branch is targeting oil industry, the other is targeting Russian arms industry, the other is targeting Russian ammunition depots, the other is targeting Russian command centers, and then every one of them is using different weaponry, different UAVs, and every one of them is operating this week yes, next week not, then perhaps in 3 weeks again, perhaps not, perhaps in 6 weeks again, who knows. So there was no organization, there was no cohesion in conduct of long-range strikes. I'm not religious, but I beg and pray that they put their stuff together and do it properly this time, which means you have to find a way to continue this campaign and to continue striking at the Russian oil industry. Why? Because this is really hurting Russia badly. So this is my hope in this regards. Otherwise, I congratulate for this really fantastic idea, and whether somebody is up there in NATO is or in the Baltic states or in Poland or on Mars or in Jupiter is upset about your UAVs flying to their airspace, not your problem. As simple as that.
And what could be your suggested targets?
Industry, more of refineries, more of all the possible factories manufacturing, converting these fuels into, for example, missile fuels, into rocket fuels, and so on. This is the kind of things you can hit, which are relatively easy to hit because they are big. They are relatively easy to aim, and the Russians have major problems to protect all such industry. So please, if you do something, then continue striking the same type of targets over the following 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks. And then after these 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks, then repeat the exercise in order to hit the refineries on all exporting facilities which you have damaged now. Why? Because what you shouldn't permit to happen is for the Russians to repair them. Otherwise, the entire effort was in vain. So you have to restrike the same facilities again and again and again until you notice, after 2 or 3 months, the Russians are not repairing them anymore. Then you have reached your actual aim. This facility is non-operational, and that remains that way for well, as long as it takes.
So in the final question for our
Yes.
first part of the interview about Ukraine. So today is the 1500th day of the invasion. Volume conclusion on this period of day.
Sorry, what is
what is your conclusion of this?
I said, my opinion, Ukraine should have won this war already twice by now, 2 times by now. And it didn't because of its incompetent command and political leadership. That is one point. Fortunately, the Russians are even more incompetent. What is the best of all, they are so incompetent, they, even though learning, they are meanwhile better in learning than your Glavcom and general staff. They are still not winning the war. This is fortunate. This is fantastic. On the other hand, I'm very sorry for all the millions of Ukrainians who are left homeless due to Russian advances. This is tragic. And I don't want to think what is happening at the territories occupied by the Russians now for 4 years. I don't want to know what are the people over their experiences, because this is a genocide pure. So I have mixed feelings about this. I said the war is developing in a very frustrating direction. And the best one can hope is for Glavcom, who is so incompetent, he didn't learn how to fight a war in 20 years of his military education, to now, in a matter of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 next years, learn how to operate and how to win a war using robots. This is the best we can hope now for Ukraine. I hope it's going to work.
We hope to. So the second part of our interview, we are going to talk about Iran and the war in Iran. And the first question is, did the United States and Israel intervene too late, considering that over approximately 30,000 people were killed before that in Iran during the January uprising, and just a month before Operation Epic Fury began?
Well, excuse me, I disagree with this question. It is none of US business, it is none of Israel's business what is going on in Iran. It's as simple as that. The times of some Western superpowers or Israeli superpower doing whatever they want in country, wherever they want, are long over. As much as this neo-imperialism is now so in fashion nowadays, or fashionable nowadays, they have nothing to lose over there. This is on Iranians to do on their own. Just like Ukrainians have removed their own regime, just like others Syrians have removed their regime, and so on and so on. So this is on Iranians to do. Arguably, one can chat with the Iranian opposition and promptly find out that they are incompetent in this regards and have no idea, but know everything better. But that's on them to do, not on Americans and not on Israelis. Therefore, this intervention is no intervention. This is a war of aggression. This is a war, unprovoked war of aggression, run because people who think they are exceptional, at least even God handpicked ones, think that they have the right to terrorize somebody else and to bomb somebody else, and if somebody else is not doing exactly what they want them to do, then they have the right to call them terrorists and bomb them into oblivion. This is the problem. And as long as we have that kind of ideologies in power, this war is never going to end. Because what they have done through this intervention, actually war of aggression, as first they have killed exactly the guy, which I mean Ayatollah Khamenei, who was restraining the IGC. And now check who has replaced this Khamenei and all the other killed commanders of the IGC. People who are ultra Khomeineists, who are so conservative and so extremist that you cannot imagine what are they ready to do. Exactly the people who have killed this, whether this is 10,000 or 30,000 Iranian protesters in cold blood in January, exactly they are now in power in Iran. So this is the first thing. Second thing, who now thinks that they are going to negotiate with anybody? There were no negotiations going on, and they were highly promising. And the Omani foreign minister, who was the principal negotiator, has late on 27th of February announced that there is a major breakthrough. And few hours later, Israelis launched their airstrike on Iran and killed Khamenei. And the Americans, of course, like the sheep they are, just followed the Israelis. So why should these ultra extremists of the IRGC now negotiate with anybody in the United States or anybody else? Because they know, from their point of view, it is not even the United States who is in charge of this war, of this aggression on Iran, but it is Israel. But Israel is not negotiating, it is always assassinating the negotiators. You can follow this practice, this tactics, this strategy, however you want to call it, for at least 14 years back. Whenever there are negotiations, there is a threat of major breakthrough in negotiations, the Israelis come in and assassinate the negotiators. So why should they now negotiate? These are people who have massacred not only under post office only, whether it's 10 or 30,000 protesters in Iran this January. They were people like Wahidi, like Galibaf, who started their career and built their career on basis of mass murder. They started this in 1979 during the Kurdish uprising in northwestern Iran, and they were summarily executing whatever Kurds they could get. They would go into a Kurdish village. Where are the insurgents? They are not here. They run out up in the hills. Fine, all the men out, line them up, shoot them, and that's it. And shoot them again if necessary. There are photographs of them doing that. So the next year, Iraq invaded Iran. What did they do? Okay, IRGC, we are now building up the IRGC and the Basiji, and let's go. Mass attacks into the Iraqi artillery, mass attacks into Iraqi machine guns. No problem, we are going to do that because we are Iranians and we are so great and fantastic and so on. So absolute fanatics. They are now in power in Tehran. They are going to convert this country into another North Korea with the time, just if given the time. And they have got enough time because neither the Americans have the staying power to continue bombing Iran for years in advance, nor Israel has that. So this is the creation. This is what has this war of aggression created. That's all I can tell you. It's a stupid war. It's a nonsensical war. It is absolutely mindless idiocy what the Americans and Israelis have done there. And this is not going to end in any good fashion or with any kind of success, the least of all with some kind of liberty and freedom and peace.
Mm-hmm. You have suggested earlier that the timing of the war is linked to the release of the Epstein files. Given this connection, what do you foresee as the next phase of the conflict?
Well, Trump, for his part, definitely has an incentive to distract the public in the United States away from the release of the Epstein files. So now his only option is to achieve some kind of a super turbo victory in Iran, which is why he's bragging every single day how Iranians are obliterated, but then please somebody else reopen the Hormuz. I think for the next phase, they will have to organize some kind of an attack, land attack, or actually amphibious or airborne attack on one of the islands in the Persian Gulf. Then declare this a big victory. Perhaps even donate this island to United Arab Emirates, who are the third party in the aggression, because it's not only United States and Israel who are attacking Iran and bombing it every day, but United Arab Emirates as well. So I guess we are going to see some kind of amphibious or airborne attack or assault particularly on specific islands in the Persian Gulf, in the Straits of Hormuz, and then perhaps on Kark as well, because Trump simply needs a major victory or something he can declare for a victory, because he has these midterm elections ahead of him. So he needs some kind of good, well, not only some kind, but some special kind of fantastic news. And we have a similar situation in Israel, where Netanyahu is also facing elections later this year. So he also needs some kind of particular success in this war.
Mm-hmm. So we had a third question that I don't know if you have still any comment on it, because you already covered a little bit in the first answer. So that this shift in the ruling in Iran is making no major difference, that the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei is not fundamentally changed anything. So how do you assess this new center of gravity within the Iranian leadership? So like
I think that it has changed something fundamentally, but for worse.
Mm-hmm.
It has brought the most extremist wing of the IRGC to the power. And it is, let me explain it in some detail. Khamenei's son, Mojtaba, for Westerners, he's nobody. For Ukrainians, for most of Ukrainians, he's nobody. But for people who are following developments in Iran for any serious period of time, which is some 5-10 years or something, they know that he was the chief of staff of his father. The guy who was organizing money laundering, who was advising his father, who was actually doing all the business for his father. So whatever his father ordered him to do, it was on Mujtaba to do it, to realize his orders. So therefore, he's highly experienced, well-connected, and more extreme than his father was. Then you have Wahidi, who is an IGC general, and who is also absolute extremist in regards of his way of thinking and his theories about how to fight the war. And Galibaf, the same. Galibaf might now be a civilian, a president of parliament, but his way of thinking is the same like that of Wahidi and the same like that of Mojtaba, which means no show operations like Khamenei was ordering in 2024 and last year as well, but serious strikes, military motivated strikes on Israel. The same style of operations against all the possible Iranian neighbors. This is why we see Kuwait and United Arab Emirates heavily hit the last 4 weeks, or at least US and other foreign bases in Kuwait and in United Arab Emirates heavily hit by Iranian missiles and UAVs. We see something similar happening in Bahrain, in Qatar as well. And when necessary, they are also trying to strike NATO bases in Incirlik in Turkey, Akrotiri on Cyprus, and in Oman. So there is a fundamental shift, but for worse, not in terms of IGC losing control, but actually IGC gaining much of control over the country. And no matter how this war ends, IGC is going to remain in power, be entirely free to rule the country and to model it as it likes, because it's going to have not only the official support of the supreme leader, Mojtaba, but also going to have lots of more or additional support from the population. The population is currently rallying around the flag. Even people who were openly for some sort of a US intervention in January in support of protesting are currently seeing this is not what we want to have. This is not what we want to happen. They do not like it to be bombed, because Israelis in particular are striking civilian targets in Iran. They're striking pharmaceutical industry. They're striking hospitals. They're striking museums, which are important to many Iranians, and similar objects. They're meanwhile Americans are striking roads, and so on and so on. So this is something Iranians do not like, and this is driving them straight into the hands of the IGC. And this is counterproductive to what the Americans and Israelis, nominally at least, want to achieve. So the entire operation is, as I said, a stupid war leading nowhere. On the contrary, it's leading straight into bolstering the position of the IGC in Iran.
Okay.
Окей. Я хочу сказати, що я дивився перші шпальти світових медіа, газет, і я не побачив ні в газетах Великої Британії, які є нашими стратегічними партнерами, ні у Франції, ні в Іспанії, ні одної згадки про 1500 днів агресивної війни Росії в Україні. Ніхто не згадав, всі тільки пишуть про війну в Ірані, про запуск космічного човна. І що означає це, що Європа вже забула про війну.
Sergey is monitoring the international media, and he noticed that today there is no mentioning, in non-major news.
На перших шпальтах газет сказати, що
that there is no major news like on the first cover of the newsletters, that there is not of a British, no Spanish, no France newspaper. There's no articles on the main page about Ukraine and the date of 1500 that is today of the war. That their main spotlight now about the war in Iran, and like Ukrainian war is now going on the back of their mind. They are like forgetting what is going on, because it's only intensifies.
This is, I think, I'm not sure if I told you so, or was it somebody else from Ukraine back in February, or was it January? I don't remember. I'm sorry, Ukrainians, you're not important to Europe. It's as brutal as that. You are not, you are something like necessary, not evil, but necessary trouble. Well, as long as you are so fine and keep the Russians away from us, that's fine. Thank you very much. But otherwise, sorry, we are not in let's say, urgent need to do something to help you. That is how our politics and our media correspondingly is managing this crisis, under apostrophes. So don't expect anybody here to pay a lot of attention, whether it's day 1,500 or 2,000 or 5,000. Nobody cares. Not in the politics and not in the media. The media is paid by the same people who are bribing politicians to maintain status quo. And the politicians who are maintaining status quo, they cannot come up with some kind of visions or planning for the future, strategies, higher ideas, how to defeat Russia, how to drive Russians out of Ukraine. This is not going to happen. What might happen is that one or another commercial interest is okay, so interesting for the people who actually have the say, and then this one or another commercial interest is interesting for Ukraine or doing good to Ukraine, and then things are moving. But otherwise, sorry, I said you are not interesting. You shouldn't forget many of people of our own oligarchy, especially here in Europe, is still waiting for this war to be over so they can return to Putin and to running business as usual with Putin, like they did from 2014 to 2022. This is tragic. This is awful, shameful, and cynical. But this is the way it works in Europe. When you talk with politicians here, for example, they do not understand the system of rule. They simply deny the reality, and everything is fine. Everything is great. And our biggest concern right now are illegal immigrants from Syria or Eritrea or Africa or wherever else in Africa. So Ukraine is not our biggest concern. Our third or fourth biggest concern is where are we going to spend this year's vacation? Where the people, not only the politicians who should be capable of making decisions in this regards, but the public as well, simply do not understand what kind of repercussions is this stupid war against Iran going to have for us in a few weeks and months. They do not understand what kind of a price increase for fuels are we facing. They do not understand what kind of problems are we going to have just with obtaining fertilizers. We might lose half of the harvest this year because we're not going to have enough fertilizers. What kind of price increases is this going to cause later this year? Nobody's thinking about this. Everything is fine right now here. Eurovision Song Contest is coming as next. That is one of the most important topics in Austria.
Можливо, варто було нагадати Європі і світу, особливо американцям, що сьогодні півтори тисячі днів йде війна, зробивши вчора прес-конференцію нашого президента, присвячену цій сумній даті, щоб західні медіа якраз надали інформацію. Як він вважає, ми програємо на інформаційному фронті чи росіян?
In your vision, should we draw attention of Western media to this date that is 1,500 days past of the war? And should we, like, for example, President Zelensky organized a press conference yesterday, on the day before, dedicated to this topic to try to draw attention of the West back to the Ukraine topic? Are we losing the informational campaign in this regard?
Look, you're dealing here with politicians in Europe in particular, in the United States as well, who are for 3 years, not only for 3 years, for 80 years meanwhile, but even more intensively, supporting an Israeli genocide on Palestinians. And this genocide was never as obvious as the last 2 years, and was never as fiercely supported by the West and Europe, including Europe, not only the United States, but Europe is supporting this genocide as openly as the last 2 or 3 years. Never before. You have German chancellor on this holy German democracy is declaring this genocide for Staatsräson and signing agreements with Netanyahu about how they share common values. Germany and Israel are sharing common values. One is left to wonder what kind of values. So, and you think they have sent more weaponry to Israel the last 2 or 3 years than they have sent to Ukraine over the last, 12 years. And you think you are important to them. You expect they're going to pay attention about 1,500th day of Russian all-out invasion. They do not care, excuse me, they do not care. Therefore, when you ask, shall President Zelensky organize, or he did organize one press conference yesterday, he should actually finally do his job, which would be to sit together with all the representatives of political parties you have in Ukraine and create a cabinet of experts, of best people, best minds in Ukraine, not some people with political connections, or they have to be because he's from Poltava and he's from Lviv, but best minds about how to make Ukraine independent from foreign aid in regards of its war against Russian invasion. This is what you need. You need experts at the top, people who have no political affiliations, who are not corrupt, who are no stupids, that are more interested in reaching themselves than in fighting the Russians, or who are at least not more interested in pocketing than and thus prolonging the war in order to continue pocketing from the war. This is what you need, and you need solutions on your own, because the more dependent on the West you are in this war, the longer is this war going to go on. Why? Because we have incompetence, which is probably worse than yours, in your political incompetence in Ukraine at our top. We have bloated, inefficient armed forces, which can't fight wars actually, except this is some goat herders at the top of the hill. We have structures which are so dusty and obsolete in Europe in particular, but in the United States as well, that one does not even know why they're still existent. but they do because we have to maintain the status quo, and somebody's cashing from them existing, and so on and so on. You don't need anything of this. You need tools which would enable your armed forces to defeat the Russians and drive them out of Ukraine. This is what you need. And you need also, as I said, reform at the top of your armed forces, so your armed forces can learn how to defeat the Russians. Right now, all they are learning is how to use UAVs to kill more Russians, which appears logical way forward, but it is not. What you need is systematically killing Russians in the places where it is necessary to kill them in order to enable your troops to advance, not to withdraw, or to withdraw at a lower pace than they do currently. So again, back to the topic. You don't need press conferences. You need people who are working seriously on finding solutions for problems in which you have. You need people who are going to take care to fortify, to rebuild and fortify your power supply for the next winter. Because one winter is now over, but you need to take care about the next winter and the winter behind it, and the winter after, and the winter after. This is what you need. So press conferences are helping nobody. They are helping Macron and Merz profilate themselves in front of the TV. But you don't need anything of this. You don't need victories in social media. You need victories on the battlefield. That is my point of view in this regards.
Я хочу сказати, що журналісти з факультету Грінченка високо оцінюють книгу Тома, яка вийшла у 23-му році на українській мові. Це зробити комплімент. І чи буде ще видаватися книги, може він веде перемовини про видавництво його книг на українській мові?
So he's saying that the journalist from faculty of Grinchen is highly have a high statement of your recent book that was published in Ukrainian. And they are asking, are you planning on publishing any further books?
Yes, thank you for asking. I think the book in question is War in Ukraine, Volume 2, what we published originally in English as War of Ukraine, Volume 2, that was the Russian invasion of February 2022 and these early battles on basis of information we had as of late 2022. Thank you very much, very kind. I'm very happy that they like it. Yes, we are planning a lot more books about war in Ukraine. Actually, I'm currently finalizing one of them. This is going to cover the battles for Kharkiv in February and March 2022, and then the Slobozhan counteroffensive in September, October 2022. This book was written by a Ukrainian author who is living in Kharkiv, and I'm also going to come back. I mean, this is one of some, let's say, 6 or 7 volumes which are going to cover even more about this war in Ukraine. We're going to have volumes by Ukrainian authors covering the original Russian invasion of 2014, air war over eastern Ukraine in 2014-2015, and Donald Hill and me are going to come back with volumes on all of these major campaigns fought in Ukraine since early 2022. That means Battle of Ukhleda, what else? Battle of Avdiivka, Battle of Bakhmut is actually covered already in an earlier volume, but all of these major battles ever since, Pokrovsk, of course, and so on. So there are going to be a lot more books about the war in Ukraine. We are certainly going to publish by the end of next year, certainly another 15 volumes or something, just about war in Ukraine. Yes. Why? Because these books are also attracting lots of attention here in the West, at least between people who are into this topic, who are seriously into what is going on in Ukraine. That is particularly pleasant for me as author. These are primarily younger people, younger in terms of their 20s, 30s, people who are searching for new solutions, people who are searching for different solutions, and people who are searching for authentic information. And this is what we are offering our books. And that is, I hope, also the reason why the journalists in question have found this book as interesting.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Very much my pleasure. Yes. Sorry.
I would also like to ask, because there is the topic now in, at least here in the Northern Europe, is now highly discussed in social media and also in like official media too. Like, given the recent statements and actions of Donald Trump, a question in support of certain NATO alliance. Like, how do you assess the credibility of NATO collective defense? Commenting today is like particularly smaller members of the state, such as Estonia. Like, the question here is whether NATO is going really to act the Statement 5 and come to protect, for example, Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania in case maybe not a straight attack of Russia, but of a mixed attacks. Was, for example, now there was intentions to do the same situation that was in Donetsk and Lugansk in 2014 in Ukraine, to do something, to stage something similar in Narva. So in such case of this mixed attack, information attack, coming on the some other's flag, will not really come and protect such small countries.
Okay, I'm going to answer this as follows. As long as Trump regime is in power, I'm not sure. Presence of US troops in Europe, nice and fine, but he can't care less because NATO is not doing what he expects NATO to do. So therefore, whether United States would now protect Latvia or Estonia from a direct attack or invasion by Russia, I'm not sure.
Or about other countries. It's not only
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm just trying to explain the first point. I would actually be relieved if Trump would officially withdraw USA from NATO, because this would force European members of the alliance into taking the issues of defense seriously and making their armed forces seriously capable of defending NATO. And in that case, you can be sure that yes, they would very much take care to protect also smaller NATO members, because they would know there is this so-called domino effect. If you let one of the smaller countries fall, or just a city of a smaller country, or a village in a small country fall, you are letting the entire alliance collapse. So you don't want this to happen. And they know how much is then at stake. So I hope that hope. I'm not really hoping, but let's say it this way. I think it would be very, very good for NATO, for European members of NATO, for Trump to now really do something serious about his threats to leave NATO, for the United States to leave NATO, and to withdraw US troops from Europe. That would be fantastic for Europe getting back to its own feet. And this permanent, perpetual maintenance of the status quo to be interrupted, to be stopped, and Europe getting back on its feet alone and taking care of its own security. Because without something of that kind happening, I can only agree with you that I'm not sure that NATO, including the United States, would right now or in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years come to the idea to protect smaller members in the case this would be invaded by the Russians. As simple as that.
And there is ongoing discussion in the Europe about possibly of building a more autonomous European defense structure in comparing to NATO. And in your view, how realistic is this scenario?
As long as the United States are a member of NATO, as long as there is a US-centrist NATO, very unrealistic. There were such initiatives time and again over the last 20 years in particular. And there were also initiatives of neutral European countries to create some kind of a similar structure like NATO. And nothing of this has worked because the United States are a member of NATO. And as long as this is the case, as long as the United States are a member of NATO, nothing is going to change in this regards. Why? Because our own European governments are too lazy or at least most of them. Some of Scandinavian countries and Baltic countries see the situation differently, but major European powers are too lazy, too incompetent, too rotten, but to do anything on their own. You see what is Macron doing, for example. France could easily take the lead and say, okay, we have a big defense sector. We can manufacture aircraft. We can manufacture ballistic missiles. We can manufacture nuclear weaponry. We have nuclear weaponry. We can manufacture aircraft carriers, warships, whatever you like. Italy can do that as well. And they're not doing that. Why? Because for Macron, it's more important to organize another summit the next week and provide 15 press conferences a day, bubble around and distracting from making various of his bodies ever richer and richer at the cost of the French taxpayer, than doing anything serious in this regards. It's similar in Germany. Merz is absolutely incompetent, super stupid politician who really, he's on the best way of outmatching even Trump in stupid statements, especially if you are fluent in German. This is awful to hear, to listen to. And but no, everything is fine, everything is perfect. He's better than anybody else, and he knows what to do and how to rule Germany and so on and so on. So we do not have politicians who have a vision. We do not have politicians who know where would they like to bring their country in, even in 2 years, not to talk about 20 years from now. We only have administrators administering on behalf of our own super rich, or even American super rich, and that is fine that way. You know, we have politicians who say, oh, Orban is awful, that is terrible, but Netanyahu is most welcome. But the fact that Netanyahu is supporting Orban, and it's also that both Netanyahu and Orban are best friends with Putin, who cares? You know, they're not connected the dots. And you see this also in the performance of our media. Media is also acting that way to, no, let's distract that. Orban is awful, but Netanyahu is fine. Although Netanyahu is sought for by the International Court of Justice for a genocide. So nobody cares about this. We're not reporting about this. So Netanyahu is fine, but Putin, who is doing the same in Ukraine, is not fine. He's bad guy. I mean, you have so many cynical double standards that this is incredible. And again, unless something major happens, like, for example, United States leave the NATO, nothing is going to change in this regards in Europe. Because the people are the system is not learning a lesson from its own, from being as rotten as it is.
So to sum up, how do you see the current global situation? What are your forecasts?
Well, I just spent almost 3 weeks in India earlier this month, and I must say I'm deeply impressed what I've seen over there. The country is booming. The people are well educated. The people are cultivated. They are open for dialogue. They are open for new ideas. They are advancing very quickly. And I haven't been to China, sadly, yet, but I would say, if I'm to ask, the Indians are going to teach us all that even the Chinese and Japanese and South Koreans are lazy because they're working from 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock in the evening. This is absolutely normal over there. There are fantastic opportunities over there. The country is also well defended, has a government which has this kind of a vision which I'm lacking in Europe or in America, which is thinking about what is going to happen with India in 10 or 20 years. Of course, they now have massive troubles because of the stupid war against Iran, because India was importing, depends on whether oil or gas, between 50 and 80% of its needs from the Persian Gulf, and even more fertilizers. So there are going to be troubles, but they are going to find solutions for all the troubles they are facing right now. So they are going to overcome the difficulties. So this is nice to see, you know, when you see the politicians that care. I don't say now I understand or I'm inside of what in regards of politics of India, but it is nice to see the government is doing things, and things which are absolutely, at least to me, logical, like financing education, public education, like financing the build-up of the power grid, development in regards of AI, development in regards of technologies, offering opportunities for investment, cooperating with this and that country. Really, it's fantastic what is going on over there. I mean, along the construction activity, just one district of New Delhi I've seen in these 3 weeks was bigger than in probably all of Europe, actually, Central Europe at least, combined. So this was just one district of New Delhi. So things are moving there, and it is very, very fascinating to watch this. And I guess as a democracy, whether we like this democracy or not, we are often, at least the West is very often arrogant towards vis-a-vis the Indian democracy and belittling it or calling the politicians extremist Hindus. It's similar nonsense, excuse me for expression. But I see lots of opportunities in India and the country establishing itself over the next 5 to 10 years as the leading democracy worldwide, well above China, because China, while the system, problem in China is a system. It has reached its peak and it cannot develop much further beyond this point. But in India, the system is there. It's just a question of whether they are going to retain their democracy or not. They have to be watchful over this. So India has more opportunities in this regards. So this is going to become one of the pillars of the worldwide economy in the future, India. Another major development is going to be in Indonesia, where they are struggling. They have lots of troubles, lots of issues, but I expect them to follow in the wake of India, for example. So the entire issue of knowledge, high tech, money, and so on is going to move towards east and ever further away from Europe, because we, through this insistence on the status quo of our politicians, to this insistence of our politicians on maintaining the status quo, we are not developing, we are degenerating, and correspondingly, not much is going to change in this regards in Europe, at least. Excuse me. So we really are lagging behind, and we are not going to get better in comparison to, for example, India, Indonesia. China is going to remain very powerful simply because it has such a huge production capacity, and it's going to remain influential also on the global scale, but not so much, not so aggressively like the Americans, for example, or Europeans over the last 400 years, 500 years. So the only question where I'm not sure where the continent's heading is Africa, and perhaps a little bit of Latin America. I mean, Brazil is also fine, coming forward very fine, and Chile is coming forward very fine. So let's see what happens over there. Not sure right now. But overall, I said, the movement of power centers, the power centers are moving in eastern direction. That is my impression. Power centers in terms of knowledge, money, investment, capability to invest, the willingness to invest, and so on.
Sergey has sent me last question.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a perception that engineering assets such as bulldozers and road construction, alongside with missile capabilities, are becoming a decisive factor in conflict involving the United States and Israel and Iran.
Yes.
In your opinion, is this an accurate characterization? No. And to what extent were the United States and Israel aware of Iran's extensive network of underground missile depots?
Well, how much were they aware? I would say not enough. There's still no certainty. I've actually discussed this with somebody in Washington yesterday evening. They're still not sure whether the Iranians have 25 or 27 of what they call missile cities. These are these big underground facilities dug deep under the hills in Iran. So if you, after all of these years and 40 years of Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon in 2 weeks, legends in mythology still don't know whether the Iranians have 25 or 27 such facilities. then what are you doing in that country? What are you searching for over there? That is the first question. The second question is this. Okay, now let's say the Americans and Israelis have bombed actually last year in June and now again these missile cities, these underground missile facilities. And the only lesson they have learned from bombing them, is they're bombing some of these facilities every single day for 30 days now. Mind that, every single night for 30 days now, they're bombing the same place outside of Yazd. And they have still not destroyed it. So the only thing they have learned is that they lack weaponry, conventional weaponry capable of destroying such facilities. And they have next to none of these super huge 10 tons or 15 tons heavy mob bombs, with which they have bombed the similar underground facilities, but for nuclear research in Iran last year. They have just a handful of these left, so they cannot do the same deploy this weaponry against missile cities. So let's say now what they are doing now instead of bombing them, trying to penetrate these facilities, is to bomb the entrances to them. So now each of such facility, and there are, let's say, 27 of them, has 4 such entrances or exits. So this means 108 aiming points the Americans and Israelis are trying to destroy. So they're bombing every day these entrances and exits. And all they are managing is to block them. They hit the mountain above the entrance, and then the dozens of thousands of tons of gravel, earth, and sand fall down and block the entrance. And this is why then the Iranians bring in bulldozers and bulldoze all of this dirt out of the way to reopen their underground facilities. But the problem is this, and this is why I'm calling this the bulldozer campaign, because this is now going on for since 1st of March. The Americans bombed the entrances and the Israelis bombed the entrances. These are blocked by gravel and earth. The Iranians bring in bulldozers, unearth everything. The Israelis are targeting bulldozers, but the Iranians bring in new bulldozers nevertheless. They open them, pull out their missiles, position them, fire them at Israel, bring their launcher back into safety. The Americans and Israelis are bombing the entrance again, and then the entire circle is repeating itself every single day. Point is this: if the Americans and Israelis cannot destroy all the missiles and launchers inside these missile cities, then the entire war is for nothing. The entire effort was in vain. Why? Because Iran retains these launchers and missiles inside the missile cities. And that means whenever the war is over, it can pull them out, and it has a missile force again. And by them, considering Mojtaba and Wahidi and Ghalibaf, such people coming to power in Iran, we have to expect now Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. So they have already a ready delivery platform. This is missiles, which are proven as capable of breaking through American and Israeli air defenses. So that means this war is already lost, actually, for the Americans and Israelis. Whatever they do, except they launch a massive land invasion and capture every single 27 missile cities, they cannot win this war anymore. So what's the point? Why are they doing this? They are ruining Iran. They're destroying hospitals, they're destroying bridges, they're destroying pharmaceutical industry, they're destroying roads, ports, energy infrastructure, oil and gas production, and so on. This is the aim of the war. Is anybody monitoring this war sane enough to understand what kind of repercussions, long-term repercussions, is this going to have for the future of entire humanity? I'm not talking just about America and Israel. I'm talking about United Arab Emirates, whose economy is ruined for the next 3 to 5 years. I'm talking about Qatar, whose economy is ruined for the next 3 to 5 years at least, who are not going to be able to export oil and gas and fertilizers for the next 3 to 5 years. This is obviously something nobody is talking about, or at least not considering right now. More important is Trump's flashy press conferences and protect Israel, please, because it has the right to exist and the right to defend itself. But nobody else has this right. That is my commentary in this regards, my answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. Sergey? Microphone.
You are on mute.
Ми розшифруємо, як завжди, надішлемо на затвердження. Я хочу подякувати Тому, що за спілкування і за те, що він каже постійно те, що думає, і те, що насправді, на мою думку, відповідає дійсності. І окремо хочу подякувати пані Катерині за те, що вона була такою ж учасницею інтерв'ю, як ми вдвох з Томом. І без цього б не було інтерв'ю. Дякую, пані Катерина.
Sergey is telling you that we are going to make a transcript as usual of the video and translate it into Ukrainian, and also that we'll share the original with you. And he is thanking you for being honest and forward with your thoughts, which are actually echoing his own. And yeah, he thanked me for being here and being a part of this interview. Thank you for me also, honestly. Thank you for this interview, for spending time to answer our questions and putting thoughts into these both topics that are very important now.
Katerina,
Thank
also
you.
many
See you
thanks,
again.
and I'm actually sad to hear Sergey sharing my opinion, because this means this is terrible. Sorry, because it was not very positive, not very optimistic outlook. So I'm not happy. I was actually, I would be happy if somebody could seriously counter me, but I'm finding nobody. Thank you very much, Katerina. Thank you very much, Sergey. Thank you very much for your questions and taking time and letting me talk this much. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
later.
All the best for you. Please keep yourself safe.
You too.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.